All right,
Okay.
anybody who happens to be watching, my name is Chris Wilterdink, and I'm the Director of Young People's Ministries Program Development in the United States, and I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. And this afternoon, I'm talking with Kenneth Pruitt, and Kenneth is a connection from our United Methodist family, and we actually met a couple of years ago in Dallas. But
You
Kenneth lives in
did.
St. Louis and is going to be talking through some stuff with me because I learned about the NAACP and a travel advisory that the Missouri chapter of NAACP put into place for people of color traveling to and through the state of Missouri. So Kenneth,
Hmm.
being in St. Louis, and
Yeah.
me being from outside St. Louis, hearing a lot of the stories that have come out of there, obviously there
Sure.
is tension and a
Yeah.
significant amount of tension and sort of a continued set of circumstances and cases and mistreatment of people of color there. Did that have anything to do with
Right.
NAACP's travel advisory?
Yes, absolutely. And as far as I understand it, the advisory was specifically in response to a bill that was going through the Missouri legislature that a lot of groups like the NAACP and others considered discriminatory. It was around being able to file a case around discrimination, and it's actually now a lot harder to do so in the state of Missouri. So, as far as I understand it, they saw that as kind of the final straw in just a lot of lack of response and activity on the part of local government officials here to respond to, as you say, discrepancies in people of color getting pulled over, jailed for kind of mysterious reasons, even to the point of folks dying under mysterious circumstances. So I think this was the NAACP kind of publicly saying, or at least the Missouri chapter saying, enough is enough. We want folks to nationally notice these things so that we can shine a spotlight on what needs to change kind of in our local context here.
Yeah, and that definitely got my attention, right? Part of the reason that we're talking is that the National Youth Event, Youth 2019, is going to be in Kansas City, Missouri, in the
Right.
summer of 2019. And, another piece of that travel advisory from the reading and research I did had to do with, the statistics that showed that people of color were more often pulled over for routine traffic stops
Right.
in Missouri. And actually, there's like 39 or other 40 states where there's kind of this imbalance between people of color and then those of Caucasian or white backgrounds being pulled over by
Sure.
traffic enforcement. And so bringing awareness to that situation, I think, is, one of the good things that our event can do. And also, we're going to be a large event of 4,000 to 5,000 people in Kansas City. So we're kind of bringing some economic stuff with us as well. Was
Right.
part of the issue that NAACP was trying to raise awareness for related to kind of economics for the state and wanting to make
I
this.
think so. Yeah, I think so. And I think, and that was, I think the root of that was kind of revealed in the response by local officials here who said, yes, we need to look at these issues. We need to talk about them dramatically, but it's going to cause a decline in tourism. And I think what groups like the NAACP and also a lot of protesters here in St. Louis who have been in the streets for over a month in response to the recent verdict in the killing of Anthony Lamar Smith have been saying, we've been trying to bring light to these issues for a long time. Not enough responses has been happening. And so maybe if we hit at purse strings, then perhaps officials will actually finally pay attention, and they have. And I think that's been a really, really good thing. So, it's a mixed bag. Of course, we want people to come to Missouri. Of course, we want your youth and their leaders to spend money in our state, right? It's a great thing. But also these things are incredibly important. So yeah, that was definitely a driving factor.
Yeah. So since the event will be in the summer of 2019, and obviously 2 years from now, we don't know the state of any state really. But we will be bringing, a large group to Kansas City. We'll be traveling to and through Missouri. So,
Mhm.
one of the other big pieces for me is wanting to be able to encourage youth leaders and youth themselves, not only to have a good and safe experience, but also to be able to engage with issues like this that really do matter. So
Sure.
if you think about traveling through Missouri to get to Kansas City, I think about places that they could stop to learn more or kind of engage and learn about what's going on in St. Louis. Would you have any tips for us on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think like any sort of intelligent traveler, know your surroundings. Make sure you have awareness of the people who are around you. I mean, the buddy system has lasted for as long as it has as a thing because it's something that is beneficial. So, seriously, I do have colleagues who, when we travel from my St. Louis office for work to Columbia, Missouri, are very aware of which towns we stop in and where we go. So I just think, that kind of basic big city kind of eyes open, ears open, know who's around you and where you are. Those basic precautions, I think, will usually go a long way. And I'm going to assume that all these adults who are traveling with these kids have good training in our local traditions. So it doesn't worry me too much, to be honest with you. As far as learning more, yeah, I mean, St. Louis is the home of the infamous Dred Scott decision downtown at the old courthouse. There's some history to be had there. Our local history museum here in Forest Park right now is actually showing a civil rights exhibit, and they usually have something along the lines of specifically civil rights related to race. So there are good informational resources to be had, usually for free in St. Louis. We take a nice tax hike in order to make these things free for the public. So there's always good resources around.
Yeah, well, that's really good to hear. And when if you're traveling with a van full or a bus full of youth, like if you're preparing well, you are looking at the routes that have like nice big gas stations with
exactly
giant bathrooms, so that your whole youth group is
right.
not waiting for one tiny bathroom.
Sure.
Like the highway stops and those kind of things, I think would be pretty normal as well.
Agreed.
One of the other things,
Missouri is very similar to a lot of other states in that we have a handful of pretty large metropolitan areas that are in general tend to be a little more diverse, tend to be a little more, have more welcoming spaces for people of color, and then smaller rural areas that sometimes may not. So to your point, planning is everything. Take that extra step, know where you're stopping and when you're stopping, and make sure that you can check in with folks if those plans go awry.
Yeah, I would agree. And a big part of that is mapping things out ahead of time. Pick routes that you're comfortable with, pick interstates that you're comfortable with, and schedule little breaks. If you need to get out and stretch your legs, look for some of the great truck stops or rest areas where there's a little field that you can get out and run around and be able to keep your eyes open, but have plenty of space to spread out as well. Obviously, the last kind of thing I want to bring up in our conversation is that I know that Kansas City is kind of on the other side of Missouri from St. Louis, geographically speaking, right? Like it's a pretty far stretch west across the state. But I wouldn't expect you to be able to necessarily talk about the culture in Kansas City. But I do think you'd be in a great spot to kind of talk about, being able to get to know local law enforcement and how far that goes in terms of, events and people feeling safe as well, because the Kansas City Convention and Visitors Bureau has been pretty good. Our planning team is going to have meetings with the Kansas City Police Department so that we can talk about 5,000 teenagers, being in the Power and Light District and what that means and, how they're being trained to be able to react well with young people no matter where they're coming from. What do relationships look like in St. Louis with law enforcement, and how have you seen those relationships kind of improve or be a part of the equation for the racial tension that's there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in a lot of these conversations, we unfortunately love to fall into binaries, right? You're either pro-police or anti-police, or you are pro-protest or anti-protest, and human beings live lives that are a lot grayer than that. So I think, absolutely, tension, at least I would say among lots of city residents, especially those of us who have been trying to bring attention to racial inequality, is pretty tense right now. But, along with that, every single one of us who is trying to do this kind of work has a friend or a family member or a neighbor who is in law enforcement and who deals with this on a daily basis. As a diversity professional, I've done trainings with women of color who are married to white police officers. And so, I just imagine the complexity of their dinner conversations. So, like anything, I think understanding someone's name, listening to someone's story, understanding their real lived experience, and really, really learning to listen again rather than listening to respond or to retort, I think is something that we have lost a bit as a culture recently, and we could stand to relearn. So that's what I would say also to, your folks in Kansas City, talking ahead of time. This is what's going to happen. This is what we look like. These are the different kinds of diversities that we're bringing to your city. And how can we make sure that everybody stays safe? I think that kind of ounce of preparation goes a long way in the long run.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And Kenneth, I thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's always great to talk to you. And I look forward to the continued developments and work that you're doing as a part of your ministry and a part of your life there in St. Louis. So thanks again.
Cool. Thanks. Good luck.